Welcome, everybody. My name is Brad Latchett. I am PIA's Director of Government and Industry Affairs. Welcome to The Break. Today's segment is going to be focusing on one of our Connecticut legislative priorities, excess lines reform. And to speak about that is our very own Claire Irvin. So turn over to you, Claire.
Hi, thanks, Brad. As you mentioned, this is one of our series of videos talking about legislative priorities, specifically for Connecticut and for excess lines reform. That introduction sounds like it's a big reform. It's excess lines, a huge area. The priority itself is fairly straightforward. It's simply to remove the requirement that producers obtain 3 declinations before renewing an excess lines policy with the same carrier. So effectively, if a client has a policy they're happy with in the excess lines market, as a producer, you know there's not anything in the admitted market, and that it just makes the renewal process easy, straightforward, and saves both everyone's time and overall benefits the consumer by making it just much easier. It would still require the 3 declinations before placing the policy. That provides the check that the policy is being placed in the non-admitted market because there's nothing available in the admitted market. And so this whole thing is just intended to make the process a bit more straightforward for everyone, just cut down on paperwork. And so just as some background for effectively why this is one of our priorities, PI has been working to make this process a lot more straightforward for producers in Connecticut for many years now. We were successful several years ago removing the requirement that producers obtain affidavits for each declination. So now it's just you need proof of the declination. You don't need a signed affidavit. It makes things much simpler, particularly in a time when most things are being done online and affidavits complicated. PI, part of the focusing on renewals also comes from feedback from other interested entities when drafting the priority, who are concerned about how the check for consumers that the declinations could provide. So we kind of effectively just focus on the renewal process and the next step for making this process more straightforward and adapting for how business is done in 2022. So I mentioned that we kind of adapted what our goal was because of some concerns. A big reason that declinations exist is as a protection for consumers from the risk associated with the non-admitted market. The associated risks all come from several decades ago, back when the non-admitted market was much less stable than it is today. It was much less stable and much riskier for policyholders to go with a carrier that wasn't regulated quite as much. A lot has changed since these went into effect. The excess lines has become more regulated, both on a state level, but also internally. You have excess lines associations popping up around the country that help monitor excess lines carriers. They're now some of the highest rate, that includes highest rate carriers, and many are owned by the same companies that have have the admitted carrier. So it could be as simple as switching a policy is not available in Brad Latchett's insurance company under the admitted market. So you go with Brad Latchett's non-admitted affiliate. It's technically the same company, just regulated very differently. And as a result, the market is very stable now, which means the declinations process has gone from a huge check for consumers to making the process a lot more complicated without being necessary. So, and then of course, remote work and the shift to quoting portals have really complicated the declinations process. It used to be that the 3 declinations were coming from people. Now they're coming from portals, and that makes it just more complicated to obtain the proof of the declination. And experienced producers don't even need to go in the portal to know that the declination is coming up. But producers who write these coverages all the time know what is available and what's not available with their carriers. They're writing policies all day. So they know going through that process and getting the declinations takes time that could be used better serving clients, better making sure they're getting the right coverages in place. So again, it just simplifies the process, and the risks to the policyholder have really are no longer really there because of how much the market has stabilized. So as far as our next steps with advocacy to try and get this legislation passed, is focusing on explaining to legislators why this legislation will greatly help policyholders in Connecticut. It's a small tweak, and it's really focused on a small segment of the market. But again, it frees up time and energy on everyone's part. So policyholders who need an excess lines policies can focus more on whether it's business, house, getting the right coverages in place than going through the steps. And same with producers who can make sure that they're getting the coverage that best fits their policy and not going best fits their risk, more than trying to put together a bunch of paperwork in an era where no one uses paper. So if you're watching this video and thinking, oh, it'd be great to help get this legislation forward. You renew a lot of excess lines policies, and that would save you a lot of time. You know that will save you time, benefit everyone. The best way to join our advocacy efforts is simply watching your inbox for any PI Connecticut calls to action. If you do have experience in this area and want to share it with us, that can be really, really useful when advocating for the legislation. So please share it with us at govaffairs@pia.org. And keep an eye on the weekly dispatch and PI News and Media, as well as social media for any updates on this legislation as we go through. And if interested in actually needing to explain this to your legislators, please send us an email. We'd be more than happy to help set those up and help you on that call so that you can really help legislators understand that this is a small but significant tweak to renewing these policies. So that if you have any further questions, comments, or feedback, please let us know. Myself, Brad, or the PI Resource Center, and keep an eye on your news and media and social media feeds. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Brad.
Thank you, Claire. That was awesome. I do have one question, and it's more of a broad question on the Connecticut legislative session. So I was wondering if you give like a 30 to 60 second just summary of what the Connecticut legislative session looks like. Or maybe the
Connecticut legislative session is more of a two sprints, really. This year's a short session that starts in February, ends in May. And part of the legislative process is effectively first getting a proposal through the committee and when it can be drafted. So you have a very short window of time to really get your raise bill to the even the drafting stage. So it's not one where we can propose the bill it can get introduced in February and get passed on the last day of session. So we're working hard in a very limited window, and then there'll be a second limited window when the time passes to pass the legislation by the end of May. And if we don't get it, then start next year, build on any advocacy efforts from this session to try and get it over the finish line and what will be a longer session.
Well, it's always so interesting, the different intricacies of state politics and government, how it works. Well, thank you, Claire. That was awesome. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you enjoyed this for everybody who is joining us now, and please look for more breaks in the future. Thank you, everybody.